This is my $1.5 million dividend portfolio, and these are real dividend payments that I received each and every month. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how much it paid me and if it's enough to retire. The idea of letting your money work for you instead of trading your time for dollars is the pinnacle of financial freedom. And that's exactly what dividend investing is designed to do when it's done right. But before we get into the numbers, let's take a quick step back because if you're new to dividends, it helps to understand what they actually are and how they work. A dividend is simply cash a company pays you for owning its stock. When a company earns profits, instead of keeping all the money, it sends part of it back to shareholders. Most often this is quarterly, but can be monthly or yearly. The more shares you own, the more you get paid. And if you reinvest those dividends, you can buy even more shares that pay you again. That's why dividends are seen as passive income. You don't have to work to get paid. You just have to be a part owner of the company. Every time you buy shares of a stock, you are buying a piece of a real company and becoming a real part owner. This is an important distinction that helps long-term investors stay long-term investors. Owners don't panic over daily price moves. They care about cash flow, growth, and long-term value. If you owned a private company, you wouldn't sell it because someone offered you a lower price tomorrow. You'd focus on whether the business is getting stronger. That mindset helps long-term investors stay patient, avoid emotional mistakes, and let compounding actually work. The portfolio that we are looking at was my main account going into 2024. This portfolio has compounded to a value of over $2.1 million as of today and has gone through some changes, but I will touch on that at the end of the video. So back to 2024 when money markets were yielding around 5% and analysts were calling for a recession. My wife had lost her job, I was buying a house, and I felt like I needed some safety. So the perfect place for me was 5% money market and dividend paying stocks and ETFs. My goal was to completely replace my wife's income with dividends and have enough cash to weather any storm. Prior to this point in time, my investing philosophy was mixed between dividend and growth strategies. Seeing the growth in dividends year after year was incredible, and the possibility of reaching financial freedom just from dividends was irresistible. For those reasons, I went all in on dividend investing in 2024. As you can see, dividend investing starts out slow. My first year in 2018, I only made $1,675 in dividends. But over time, something changes. As you reinvest dividends, buy more shares, and companies raise their payouts, your income starts to stack on top of itself. At a certain point, the growth accelerates, not because you're working harder, but because compounding takes over. Each dollar of dividends buys more income producing assets, which then generate even more cash flow. That's why dividend investing rewards patience. It starts quietly and slow, and then grows rapidly once the snowball gets big enough. In these 7 years, my dividends grew at a staggering average annual growth rate of approximately 75%, and I made a total of $118,461 in dividends. I focused on three main criteria when selecting stocks: yield, what the company pays you, dividend growth, is the company paying you more over time and not because the share price is falling, And most importantly, business quality. Would you want to own this business even without the dividend? All of this is working under the assumption that the dividend is sustainable. If the company did not have a sustainable dividend, then it was not considered. New investors often fall for companies with super high yields, and those massive yields come with a massive trade-off. The reason the yield is so high is usually because the share price has dramatically fallen or that the company isn't growing. These companies often have deteriorating fundamentals such as decreased sales, mounting debt, or are in a dying industry. As the share price falls, it artificially inflates the yield. A new investor sees a big juicy yield and buys in, but underneath the surface, the company's payout ratio is likely climbing towards 100% or higher. This means that they are paying out more than they earn. Eventually, the pressure becomes too much. The company slashes the dividend to save cash, which causes the stock price to tank again. The investor gets hit with a double whammy. Their income disappears, and their initial investment is worth even less. This is why looking at quality before yield is the only way to survive long term. A good place to start when building a quality dividend portfolio is by looking at all of the largest dividend ETFs: VIG, SCHD, VYM, DGRO, and many more. Next, look at the list of dividend kings, companies that have paid an increasing dividend over 50 years, and dividend aristocrats, companies that have increased their dividend for over 25 years. I chose companies like Procter and Gamble, AbbVie, Johnson and Johnson, Pepsi, Realty Income, and Caterpillar. I made just shy of $50,000 in dividends with a blended yield of about 3.5%. At that time, the median income was around $63,000. I didn't quite get there, but I did make an incredible amount of money with very low risk, and I did completely replace my wife's income. So to answer my question, no, it was not quite enough money to retire. In order to beat the median individual income, I would have needed a yield of about 4.5% or a starting portfolio value of about 1.8 million. Dividend investing compounds in a very different way than most people realize. When a company pays you a dividend, you can take that cash or reinvest it to buy more shares. Those new shares then pay dividends too, and over time, that creates a snowball effect. The key is that your income grows even if you never add new money. As companies raise their dividends and you own more shares, your cash flow compounds year after year. That's why long-term dividend investing isn't about chasing the highest yield today. It's about owning strong businesses that pay you more over time and letting compounding do the heavy lifting for you. There is another type of compounding, though: growth investing. And next week, I will make a side-by-side comparison between the two. But for now, let's jump into a few portfolio updates and some quick news. Continuing the theme of saying no to distractions and goodbye to small positions that I do not have the conviction to add more money to, I sold Interactive Brokers and used the proceeds to buy more Meta and Netflix. I made good profits on IBKR and think it's an incredible company, but I think Meta and Netflix offer better opportunities. I will continue to buy both of these companies, especially if the share prices continue to fall. Now, let's jump into some news.
The average rate on the popular 30-year fixed mortgage dropped 22 basis points to 5.99%. It hasn't been that low since the start of February 2023, and that's according to Mortgage News Daily. This came after President Trump posted on social media Thursday that he is instructing mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to buy $200 billion in mortgage-backed bonds, or so-called MBS. He said this will drive mortgage rates down, monthly payments down, and make the cost of owning a home more affordable. And clearly it did just that on the news. But what does it actually mean going forward if Fannie and Freddie do buy more MBS? Well, so Fannie and Freddie, which are in government conservatorship, they don't originate loans. They buy loans from lenders, bundle them into MBS, and sell them to investors. And that helps replenish lender funds for new loans and keeps interest rates lower and more stable for home buyers. Purchasing more mortgage-backed bonds or securities does move mortgage rates lower. The Federal Reserve did it in the first years of COVID, a lot more, in fact.
In 2020 to the beginning of 2022, the Fed bought an estimated whopping $2.5 trillion worth of mortgage-backed securities. $200 billion is about 8% of that, so this may work, but the effect will not be nearly as dramatic.
And mortgage rates dropped to record lows. Now, while it is still not known how quickly this would start now and how long it would take, analysts are predicting where mortgage rates could end up. Most put the drop somewhere between 25 and 50 basis points, but some even lower. Analysts at UBS said this decline may provide a boost to both new construction demand and existing home turnover. So what does that mean to you and me? Well, a drop of 1/4 percentage point, say 6.15% to 5.9%, would save you on your monthly payment. How much? Well, for someone buying the median priced home, which is right around $425,000, using a 30-year fixed mortgage with a 20% down payment, the monthly payment would then drop by $118. Now, for some, that might not seem like a lot, but for first-time buyers right on the edge of affordability, it could make a difference.
This is the Goldman Sachs Housing Affordability Index, and it is showing that now is the least affordable time to buy a house in at least 30 years. Why? Simply put, the cost of everything has gone up and wages haven't. The cost of debt, mortgages, has more than doubled since 2021. Home prices are at or near all-time highs, and wage growth is barely inching up, somewhere in the low single digits.
Meta is striking deals to secure a massive nuclear supply of energy for its AI data centers. In fact, inking agreements with 3 providers, including Oklo and Vistra, whose shares are up about 10% today. Let's get to Julia Borson for the details in today's Tech Check. Hi, Julia.
Hey, Kelly. Well, Meta's nuclear deals are all about its fight to secure energy to achieve its AI ambitions as the social giant works to become a real player in terms of AI functionality as its tools lag Google's and OpenAI's. It's also working to secure the energy to fuel that battle. Today's deals aim to help catch up with OpenAI, Microsoft, and Google's nuclear deals. Echoing past comments from Mark Zuckerberg, Wedbush writing, quote, the hyperscalers aren't backing off one bit in their AI ambitions, and while GPUs data center construction have been a gating factor in years past, the focus now is pivoting to energy availability. Meta shares are down 13% since it warned in its last earnings that this year's capital expenditures would increase, quote, at a significantly faster pace.
It looks like big tech is going to continue to spend this year, and that we've got a long way to go until energy is no longer the bottleneck.
The company forecasts capex as high as $72 billion for 2025. That's up from $39 billion in 2024. And today's deal could impact this year's spending, although Meta isn't disclosing any of the financial terms of these deals. The question is when and how Meta will justify its lofty investments. B of A writing this morning that Meta, quote, is not a hyperscaler building data centers for other customers yet. It is also not thought of as a top 3 LLM. That comment reflecting that Meta hasn't fully laid out its plan to monetize AI investments such as Llama. Meta's nuclear energy is set to come online by 2030 at the earliest, and Kelly, a lot can change by then.
Wall Street is turning bearish on Meta because of their massive capbacks and no clear picture on when the payoff will finally hit. Meta is now trading at a forward PE of under 22, which is below the S&P 500. Meanwhile, Meta is growing revenues at nearly double the rate of the index. To me, this is looking like a good opportunity to pick up some Meta shares while the market sentiment is down. This week is going to be action-packed and likely full of ups and downs. All the big banks are reporting earnings throughout the week, and three of my companies are reporting as well: Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and Taiwan Semiconductor. Big bank earnings give early insight into consumer health, loan demand, credit quality, and capital markets activity. Because banks sit at the center of the economy, their results often signal whether growth is accelerating or slowing long before it shows up in the broader data. We also have inflation and Fed policy updates. Key inflation reports, the Consumer Price Index (CPI) on Tuesday and the Producer Price Index (PPI) on Wednesday. These will show if price pressures are easing, influencing interest rate cuts. A Supreme Court ruling on Trump's tariffs are also expected. And finally, Fed Chair Jerome Powell is under criminal probe by federal prosecutors. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.